Um, Thank you everyone for joining us today, and I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet. I'm based in Sydney, as is Carl, and I'd like to pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging as well. So let's kick off today. What we're going to do is just do a bit of a recap of the strategy, where we've come from. I'd also would like to thank the reference group. You have been invaluable in your feedback, in your time. We've met on a fairly regular basis, and it's been really wonderful having such a proactive group of people who have really taken a step back and looked at the big picture and about what is possible for the Port Macquarie and the surrounding area moving forward. So I know Carl and I both really appreciate your time that you have put into this project. So thank you. So if we'd like to get underway, thanks, Carl. So the recap of the strategy, as you know, we've run workshops. As Jane said, with over 100 people, we did a field visit trip. We were in region for about a week. We went to many, many amazing places in and around the region. We met with the local Aboriginal communities, industry sector, artists, artisans, cultural groups. I feel like no stone was unturned in who we communicated with. We then presented the brand strategy and went back with consultation around the brand strategy and presented that to many people. And that also has been signed off by council. And now with the creative execution, the fun bit, a lot of people would say, I argue that the strategy bit's the fun bit, because that's about really how do we position ourselves? How do we think about ourselves in a different way? And how do we actually position ourselves against other competitor destinations, so we show up differently and we resonate with our target audience? I think that's really important. So if we just have a bit of a recap now of the strategy, Carl will move to the next page. So those who are in the workshop, remember we showed what does the rest of the world look like? Who are our perceived competitors? Yes, many of them we can collaborate with, but as you can see, there's not a lot of difference in the way different regions are showing up, that they're very similar, especially if they're coastal and they're talking about their attribute of nature being the main reason for going to that particular destination. So we know we had to dig a bit deeper to find out what is it about Port Macquarie and the surrounding region that would attract people and get cut through in the marketplace. So people sat up and took notice, because that's pretty hard to differentiate just from imagery alone and by their taglines and about their fonts, etc., all those different brand elements that they use. How do you pick one destination over the other, and how are they different from each other? So this is just a really quick summary of a very large document, but what we did, the first thing we did was tested the category. You know, are you in the tourism category or are you in the lifestyle category? So the vision we set for the Port Macquarie and surrounding region was to show up and act as a lifestyle brand. This gives you a much more breadth and the stories you can tell, what sectors can use the branding and use the thinking behind the brand strategy, because it is so much more than just about tourism and just about people coming on holidays. It's about the lifestyle you and your surrounding region and the surrounding region offer to the visitor, but also to those who are thinking of perhaps about relocating outside of major city centres. So when you take a lifestyle brand, there's a lot more breadth of story that we can tell. So that was the first thing we identified. Let's have a change of category. Let's shake up the category a bit more and not just be about tourism. So the values that you need to be able to demonstrate as this lifestyle brand: unhurried, thoughtful, dependable, sociable, and a meeting place. Just on a meeting place, many people who we spoke to, because we undertook some research as well about people who already travel and spend time in the region for holidays, many people spoke about, including the local Aboriginal community as well, about Port Macquarie and the region being a meeting place for people to come together to meet with their family, whether that's because of its geographical location between two major centres such as Sydney and Brisbane, or whether it was a place that facilitated families and communities coming together. So these values are really strong, and they really underpin very well a lifestyle type brand. And at the centre of all our research and all our workshops, we identified an essence. Now, I need to make this very, very clear. This is not a tagline. It's about what is it in the mind of the visitors who are coming to visit you, or even for those who might relocate, or even for those who might live in the region now. What is the promise that you can make to people visiting and living in your region? And that is that you have the ability to allow people to indulge in time. Our research showed that time is a commodity that is precious to those who are, to the consumers or to the visitors or to people who want to live there. It's a really precious commodity. And what your region does is allow people to take a step back and to spend time with their friends or having experiences in your region. And it doesn't mean doing lots of things. It's about doing a few things and doing them really well, spending more time in your region. And from a tourism point of view, we know if people spend more time in the region, stay longer, they'll spend more money. So it's about also increased yield. It's not always about increasing numbers of people. It's about also increasing spend. So the other thing that indulgence of time does is actually connect to your visitor on an emotional level. You're saying, we understand you, we understand what you want. And this is perhaps where it's a bit different from some other regions who will talk more about their attributes. What we're talking about is how does your brand and your destination really connect at an emotional level to your visitor? The personality of your region, it's informal, it's casual, it's sociable, and it's very human. So when we started briefing in the Swell group about how the brand shows up creatively, these are really important elements that need to shine through. And how do we do that in an engaging, fun way? But it also differentiates how you show up compared to other destination brands. So the personality traits will help define the way in which the audience see the brand and relate to it. And there are a number of elements that Swell have designed that help bring this to life, as well as the values. The other thing about taking this brand essence of indulgence of time, it means it's the overarching story about how do we tell the story of your region, because you have many villages, towns, you've got a city, you've got many different tourism operators, everything varying from restaurants and wine experiences to mountain biking experiences, to sailing, to scuba diving, to surfing. You have many cycling, walking. There's so many different offerings, but we can't talk about all of them in a headline or in a brand. So this is where that indulgence of time hangs the whole region together, all the places and experiences. And it's about then creating themes to demonstrate that indulgence of time. So instead of just talking about places to eat, it might be talking about the long lunch might be one of your themes, or the slow drive, art and culture, the late dinner, nature and wildlife, green things to do, art for the home, or produce for the pantry. So once again, it's about how do we link it back to a lifestyle brand, and how do we tell a story that is the hook that your customer or your visitor can relate to. And then there's all these options that sit underneath that hook. And that's what's really important. How do you get a quick shortcut hook to say, yes, they're talking to me as a visitor. I want to find out more about that destination and what they have on offer. So I'm now going to hand over to Scott and Sunny so they can take you through the concepts. So just to reiterate here, they are just concepts. They are the two concepts that are not finalised. They need working up once one has been chosen. but they're very much about concepts that talk to the strategy, but also understand that you're so much more than just about Port Macquarie, the town itself, or the city itself, that you have a broad offering with many towns and villages. But the concepts very much link back to that indulgence in time and how that can be expressed. Carl, did you have anything to add before I hand over in case I've missed something or you don't think I made something clear?
No, I don't think I have anything to add, which I know a lot of people will say that's very unusual, except for one thing, actually, now that I think about it. The last point that you just made is that these are the concepts. The end of this project, there's a guideline delivered. And so the preferred concept then goes into the process of developing the guidelines that will actually help to define the tone, the manner, how you use the various different elements of the creative expression. And that is a really important point, because that's the bit that makes it easy for the brand to get used, whether it's, co-branding with events, or whether it's profiling the region in a particular way, or a particular set of experiences. The guideline will give great guidance to that. So that is a step to come, and the concepts first. So that's it from me.
Thank you, Carl. And now I'll hand over to Scott and Sunny, who I know are eager to share their design thinking. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so as part of the creative execution, Scott and I have developed two creative concept directions. Although both appear visually distinct from each other, both have been well informed by the strategy and help us make a lot of the design decisions that we make throughout this process. So we'll go straight into concept one.
Scott, you're on mute.
Oh, he is.
Have you got me now? Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Good. Okay, concept one. It's inspired by the idea of not being limited or confined by time. And we've used the sundial as a visual reference to emphasize this idea. And that has actually informed the basis of the symbol in this concept. Carl, if you flick through, you'll all see how the logo is constructed using these lines, and using the sundial as the foundation of its form, I guess. But the nice thing is that when it's complete, the parts come together to represent a meeting place. And as Charlotte mentioned, we know Port Macquarie is considered a meeting place for surrounding cities and states, and has also been a culturally significant meeting place for our Indigenous community. Going over to the next slide, this is our word mark, very simple and uncluttered. And it's set using a typeface which is handmade, or it adds a handmade touch. And this sort of reflects back to our brand personality of being casual, social, and human. The logo comes across as very proud, confident, but approachable. So sorry, you go, Sunny.
We've got a color palette. So purple and yellow are very complementary colors, but what makes this color palette unique is that it is quite minimal. This is very intentional. This helps ensure that the brand has consistency and therefore recognition. In practice, it's kind of easier to achieve a cohesive feel when we have fewer colors in a brand. But to add an additional layer to the brand, we've included textural elements. Go to the next slide.
Sorry, just jumping in there, it might not be showing up incredibly well on screen, but the colors aren't flat. There is a slight a texture to them, which will be clearer if you see this in real life application. Sorry, Sunny.
That's right, yeah. So here we can start to see the brand elements and color palette begin to interplay. The pure I guess, simplicity of the word mark makes it really legible, really easy to use. Here are a few examples of how it can be applied, left aligned, right aligned. And these are some of the technical processes we go through to ensure that the brand is legible in all formats, large, small, digital environments, that sort of thing. Go next.
So yeah, as Charlotte mentioned, each town in the region plays a fundamental role in telling the story of the entire region. And so we've developed this PM stamp device. It's like an informal, simplified version of the complete logo that we can use to visually unify all the towns under one identity, which is a nice way to help promote inclusivity throughout the region. Yeah, I think we can go to the next slide. Thanks, Carl. So again, using the geometry of the sundial logo or the structure of it, we've developed this unique grid system. It's a nice tool to be able to use to house imagery. Just flick over, Carl, a couple. You can see how you can choose sections or slices of it to house particular images, which is a nice way to reinforce the strategy as it captures a slice of time or a particular moment in time, showing up time spent in a way that you would like to spend it. You'll see how the grid is used in the following slides, like this example, to compose different visual materials. So if we just go back one, Kyle, to the billboard.
So here's a first look of the brand in practice, and you start to see all the elements starting to work together. If you go next, Carl. Here's an example of a press advertisement. Now, an important element to the brand in both concepts is our tone of voice and our copywriting. So you'll notice throughout both concepts that all our headlines reference time without actually saying the word time. This is quite a clever way that we can allude to our strategy without being too obvious or explicit. And copywriting this manner, we can have a lot of fun with it, and it provides a bit of intrigue to the reader.
And this example is a good sort of shows how we can be playful and have some fun with our tone of voice as a way to engage. And not only does this headline reference time, the photography we've chosen suggests a long lunch, which has been enjoyed, over an extended period. But it's quite tightly cropped and personal. It's not sort of showing one of the natural attributes of the region. And this is a nice way. This use of candid, intimate, imperfect photography is a bit more of a true reflection of time spent in Port Macquarie. And using this type of photography really pushes the brand into the lifestyle space.
So here's a press ad that uses some of those textual elements in the background there. Again, the headline is a clever reference to time, and it also relates to the photography in this instance. This example could speak to Ricardo's or any other offering in our region. And for this example, rather than having a photography of the greenhouse or the farm, again, we're using photography which is much more personal and relatable to our audience. It's more about the experience and the lifestyle and the emotion involved as opposed to the farm itself, for example. This isn't the perfect image. I think if we were to do a photo shoot or something, it'd be a bit more uncluttered and a bit more fun. It is beautiful, but it's not so real, but it just gives you a sense of how the brand could come to life.
This example shows how our elements can work with a full bleed image. And this particular headline, while referencing time, also speaks to the cultural heritage of the region. You can see here that although we're not really playing with too many elements, headline, logo, and a powerful image, we can, just combining those elements, we can create a very distinct look, a distinct Port Macquarie look.
Here we've got an example of how we can use the grid system to create dynamic compositions, and having that angle like that creates quite a bit of energy in what would normally be quite a flat advert.
Which is important because in everything we're doing, we need to make sure that we're not promoting Port Macquarie as a sleepy, coastal town. It's much more than that. And this is one way we can help achieve that.
In this environment, we start to lead with photography, kind of to help transport our audience. This particular execution shows both an activity behind there with the fishermen, and at the front, something that could be alluding to the amazing seafood offering without being explicit about that. You go next. Here's a better look at the previous examples. And then on the right, it shows how effective it can be just without an image as well.
And the right-hand example it does really, that type of simplicity is a little more daring, and I guess pushes us more into that next gen category if we were to use, if we are to apply the brand in that way. So we have flexibility there. This is just in a sort of brand expression used to showcase the flexibility of the brand and the elements. So using our reduced color palette and textural elements, we can bring those together to create something very distinct and quite engaging. Next, please, Carl.
Here are some examples of how we can really push Port Macquarie as a lifestyle brand. We can easily apply this visual identity across thongs, caps, coffee mugs, surfboards, you name it. I think being able to create this sort of material can really help gain a local buy-in of the brand, and everyone can all the locals can be ambassadors for Port Macquarie.
And we also know that the brand will need to work sort of in a co-branding type environment. So we've used the Ironman, the local Ironman event as an example of this, showing how both the word mark and the symbol can be used in their own way. And if you just flick over, Carl, this is an example of it in practice, though potentially event flags on the right or the starting blocks on the left.
Here's the brand incorporated perhaps at the end of the Wakulda projection. An element to any modern brand today, we need to ensure that they work successfully in a digital space, in a digital world. And our symbol lends itself to being animated really well. Here's a social media application that makes use of the Instagram carousel feature. Just a closer look at the symbol as an avatar and how it works quite nicely in this space.
And here is an example of how the website could look. We just have to be clear, the design of the website will go through a large process of scoping and whatnot. This is purely an example of how we can use the elements in this space. And if you flick to the next one, Carl, you can see how our elements really do combine to create something with real cut through, especially against our competitors.
So this brand will be distinct, I guess, across the board, not just in this environment.